Hi, and welcome to our webcast for November 11, 2016. So it's the Remembrance Day. I wish to every veteran the best that they could have. My name is Christian Lebré, and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate people with disability. So Amy will talk about our subject today. Sorry, I should have given you the subject. We have two subjects.
Today's topics are language of legal complaint evokes pity and fear, and assisted suicide ballot initiative approved in Colorado. So the first item is language of legal complaint evokes pity and fear. 2 weeks after Canada's assisted suicide and euthanasia bill C-14 became law in June, a complaint was filed in British Columbia to challenge parts of the law. So that was pretty fast.
Yeah.
Right after the law came.
She was ready when the law was passed.
Right. The plaintiff, Julia Lamb, is a 25-year-old woman with spinal muscular atrophy type 2. In her suit, she says two parts of the law of the definition of disability under Bill C-14 unfairly limit her access to assisted suicide and euthanasia and should be set aside. These are requiring that the person be in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability, and requiring that natural death be reasonably foreseeable.
So remove that, and it's free for all, suicide for everybody.
Right. Well, those are the two parts of the law that are supposed to limit access to the law to people who are near the end of life, as opposed to anybody else with a disability. And
because this law is supposed to be compassionate for people who are suffering
and people who are at the end of life. And it's not supposed to be for anybody. It's supposed to be people who are near the end of life. And so those parts of the law are
that was the intention of the law. That was the intention of the court.
Right. Yeah. The court was trying to, well, they're claiming that the court didn't have that intent. And so this is where the argument comes from. The complaint uses loaded language and images to manipulate the emotions of the reader into believing that Miss Lamb's quality of life is both poor and precarious. It suggests that her disability is a fate almost worse than death, and that any deterioration in her condition would tip the scales into the dreaded territory. There is no recognition that most people with aids and support can adjust to changes in their health status. So she's trying to evoke certain emotions in the people who read it to think that she's in such a terrible condition because of her disability, and it's going to get worse at any moment. That's what she's trying to do.
Yeah, that strategy is not good for handicapped people who want to live.
Right, because it feeds into the stereotypes of disabled people and what most people think about disabled people. It feeds those stereotypes and makes them stronger. Here are a few examples from the complaint that give a sense of how it's written. Quote, at age 7, Julia underwent surgery for her scoliosis, which was causing one of her lungs to collapse. The surgery entailed applying hooks and screws to her spine to anchor 2 long rods.
If you look at the operation, it's
right. It makes you feel.
It's a quite common operation.
Right, and it makes you feel squeamish, and it makes you feel like she's an object of medical care. So despite her increasing, this is another quote, despite her increasing disability, Julia moved out of her parents' house to live as independently as possible.
As possible.
Right, as if she weren't living independently if she were living in an apartment with people to help her with her activities of daily living, as if that wasn't independent. She currently is not capable of any daily living activities and requires assistance for bathing, dressing, toileting, and preparing meals. However, later on, they talk about certain activities that she can do, like putting on makeup and stuff. So it's not accurate to say that she's not capable. And in fact, she is capable because she directs personal assistants to help her with those tasks.
Yeah, but it's what rich people do. They are served by other people.
Right. You know, people who are wealthy have people to do those things for them. So it's not really any different.
I know many women who want their hair dressed by
pay money to get their hair combed.
Quite a lot of money sometimes.
Right. The next section, the next quote: Julia wakes up to 5 times per night from discomfort and pain and requires assistance to adjust her positioning. And this is one of the examples that shows that she's not getting good pain management if she's in pain. Quote, she is sensitive to the moods of other people, and she finds it exhausting to be so frequently in the company of other people. So that tells me that she is having trouble managing her assistants if she feels that she is obligated to make them feel happy. And it seems like a problem of managing her assistants.
Yeah, it's not a problem of to be handicapped. It's a problem of management.
Right. Also, another quote, Julia is unable to move her head or move or bend her legs and is unable to bend her hips. She has severe weakness in her arms and legs, although she retains a limited range of motion in her arms. So again, they're emphasizing all the negatives.
Side or handicap. Yeah.
Right. Rather than what she can do and what she can accomplish. They do that a little bit, but they really emphasize the negative.
Yeah.
She cannot brush her hair because she cannot reach over her head. That's another quote. And again, people pay money to get that done. Julia experiences frequent pain from muscle contractures, meaning cramps, in her hips, shoulders, elbows, wrists, and ankles.
There is many ways to control it.
Right, exactly. Physiotherapy has provided her with temporary gains in mobility, but has not provided lasting relief. She also occasionally experiences severe back pain as a result of her scoliosis surgery. Again, she's not getting good pain management if she's in that much difficulty. She feels as though her body is starting to fail her, which makes it difficult for her to feel as though she can forge ahead in life. So that's her mental state. And as we said before, people can adjust to changes in their physical state through getting support and encouragement. Her grasp is not as strong as it used to be. She can no longer reach as far as with her arms. Again, it's a negative thing about what she can or can't do.
Yeah, she has some kind of neuromuscular problem, and it's degenerative. But we know many people who live with it.
Right, many people who live with it, and many people who have less movement than she does, who don't, feel the need for euthanasia. So, why does she need to?
Yeah, why is she so special?
Policy?
When she describes things that happen to many people.
Right. Yeah. Her lung capacity is decreased and is currently only 30%. She lives with a constant fear that a mild cold could lead to pneumonia and a permanent further decrease in lung function. And a lot of people live with that same
if you
risk.
if you drive car, you can get an accident.
Right. Exactly.
So don't drive.
Right. Exactly. Their life is full of risk, in other words. For the past year, she has been sleeping every night with a BiPAP machine that assists with breathing. And Christian and I both use CPAP, which is essentially the same thing.
Except that it's only for when you breathe, when come on, you inside.
When you the BiPAP helps you expire as well as inspire. Inhale.
Or R is
Exhale.
only for inspire.
Right, inhale. She now sometimes finds herself exhausted after writing a single email. Again, emphasizing the negative. Julia may require a permanent tracheotomy in the future. Julia worries that a tracheotomy may negatively impact her ability to communicate orally.
That's true.
It sounds like she doesn't know anybody with a tracheotomy because people with tracheotomies are able to talk. I mean, it may not be quite the same, it's not the same rhythm, but they can talk. While ventilators may be portable, they are cumbersome, and Julia dreads the further restriction of her mobility. She fears losing the ability to drive her wheelchair and write and type because she loves to express herself through writing. And again, those are, not things that are realistic because anybody can drive a wheelchair if they can move their head. And
yeah, most quadriplegic drive their own wheelchair.
Right, and even people with no movement of their hands can drive a wheelchair. And also, most computers are equipped now with dictation software, so you can type whatever you want. You can write whatever you want to by dictation, and everybody does it. She worries about requiring tube feeding. Again, this is something that a lot of people do, and it's not a big deal. She feels a shadow looming over her. Julia feels that the worst possible version of her future, one where she suffers increased pain and discomfort, has difficulty breathing sufficiently well on her own, loses her independence, and loses her ability to express herself, could come upon her at any time. So those are all the parts of those are some of the parts of the complaint that really were designed to evoke fear and pity in the reader.
Yeah, it's always the worst who could happen.
Right.
But most of the time, it's happened partially or only one thing, not the other. That's for most people.
Right. The complaint uses excessively graphic descriptions designed to elicit fear and pity, such as the surgery entailed applying hooks and screws to her spine to anchor 2 long rods. To say that Ms. Lamb lived as independently as possible implies an inherently unsatisfactory outcome, so that she wasn't really independent, but in fact she was. If she has help with activities of daily living, nobody's truly independent.
Yeah, everybody depends to anybody else. If you drink milk, you depend of the store, you depend of the plants, and you depend of the farmer.
Right. Everybody's interdependent in our society. So even if you depend on personal assistance to help you, that's not really any different. The complaint exaggerates her disabilities. For example, not capable of any daily living activities. And as I said, it mentions other activities that she can do, such as putting on makeup. So it's really exaggerating what she can and can't do for the sake of portraying her as incapable and frightened. The complaint also makes reference to poorly managed pain that could be remedied. We've discussed that before. There are references to attendant management problems that can be solved with skills building, such as her sensitivity to the moods of others. And that's what independent living centers do. It's where people with disabilities who have personal assistants who help them out at home teach others how to manage the personal assistants. And she needs peer support to learn those skills in managing a personal assistant, so that she doesn't feel crowded by them and she doesn't feel like she has to take care of their feelings because they work for her. They're her employees. She's not their mother. On several occasions, the complaint refers to issues related to grief and adjustment that could be alleviated through peer counseling and mentoring, and such as fearing the worst possible outcome in any situation and fearing having to have a tracheotomy or having to use a tube feeding. Those are things that she could learn from other people who have those, who use those assistive technologies, that it's not such a bad thing. The complaint only describes the negatives in great detail and dwells on her fear of what may happen. Again, it's a form of manipulation to manipulate the court to side with her, and it enhances the stereotypes of disability rather than combating them. The use of assisted technology is portrayed as in a negative light, such as the use of a BiPAP and ventilators are cumbersome. So it makes it out that using a BiPAP machine is not a good thing, but we know.
We already use, let's say, half of the machine, and we know people who use those machines without any trouble.
Right.
What's happened with her?
Right, exactly. I mean, I've used a CPAP machine for 23 years. Christine, you've used one for 15 years?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a big deal. It doesn't need to be a big deal.
we look like two astronauts when we are going to bed, but
fighter pilots.
Yeah, something like that. But that's the worst weapon.
Right, exactly. Some of the fears expressed are based on ignorance, i.e. that a tracheotomy will negatively impact her ability to communicate orally, and that she fears losing her ability to drive her wheelchair and write. Again, as I mentioned before, those are not realistic fears.
It's not true.
She will be able to communicate orally, to speak if she has a tracheotomy, and she will be able to drive her wheelchair and type, or dictate into the computer. Fears of the worst possible version of events should not guide public policy for everyone. That is absolutely important here, because if we had public policy that was based on the fear of the worst possible events, nobody would ever drive.
Yeah, nobody will do nothing.
Right, exactly.
At all. Everything is dangerous. Crossing the street is dangerous.
Right. That's why we have cost-benefit analysis. We balance the benefit versus the cost and the potential problems, and we weigh the benefit of doing something against the potential problems, and that's why we do that. We contacted Diane Coleman, President and CEO of Not Dead Yet, for her response, because she has a very similar disability. She described her similar situation, but in a very different way. Quote, "When I was 6, doctors diagnosed me with muscular dystrophy. By the time I was 9, doctors decided that was wrong and diagnosed me as having spinal muscular atrophy type 2. I have used a motorized wheelchair since the age of 11. I cannot walk or stand at all. I had the diagnosis until I was in my late 50s, when they gave me one of the new DNA tests and discovered that I don't have spinal muscular atrophy. But they said it doesn't matter exactly what neuromuscular disability I have, because the treatment would be the same in any case. So now they call it congenital myopathy. I'm currently 63, she says.
So she lived with it since her birth, basically. And she's 63, and she's happy to live with trouble exactly or close, very close to the problem that Mr. Lamb has.
Ms. Lamb, yeah.
What happened?
Right. She says, I have curvature of the spine beginning in childhood, which required me to wear a large and uncomfortable metal brace until I stopped growing. I had spinal fusion surgery, including the insertion of a steel rod and screws in my back at the age of 19.
No comment.
Yeah, right. Which required me to live for 1 year in a convalescent hospital without sitting up at all. I completed about 27 hours of college coursework by correspondence during that year. So she was flat on her back and she completed correspondence courses.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're able to do such surgeries earlier in life and with far fewer restrictions. I have the lifelong osteoporosis that typically accompanies long-term use of a wheelchair for mobility. I use a variety of strategies to deal with physical pain. My lung capacity is 30%. For about 17 years, I have used a BiPAP for breathing support at night. For the last year and a half, I also use the BiPAP for most of the day, only breathing on my own for about 3 or 4 hours a day. So she's actually using a BiPAP for more time during the day than Ms. Lamb is.
Yep.
And, you know, she seems
She's
to be
still
okay with
working.
it. Yeah, she's
still
still working.
I don't think she's traveling anymore, but in her life she traveled quite a lot.
Right. We'll get to that.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm still able to swallow, but have some difficulty and must be careful in doing so. And I anticipate that I may need a feeding tube in the future. I know many individuals with feeding tubes and tracheostomies, and I am generally familiar with how to manage these devices and continue living a satisfying life. So she has the peer support of other people who use those devices, and she knows
other people. She's a part of a community, and she likes her life.
Right, exactly. I'm sure that I could go on and on about specific things I can't do because of my disability, and I'm sure that my lawyers would require me to do so if I were seeking assistance for euthanasia, because the general public, including judges, are ignorant about living with disability, and such descriptions bring up feelings of pity at best and horror at worst. But frankly, such an exercise seems like whining and manipulation. I live with my adorable husband and disabled cat in a house in the suburbs of Rochester, New York. I work at a full-time job, which primarily consists of working at a home office involving email, reading, document analysis and writing, and similar tasks, as well as telephone calls and meetings.
So it's an office work.
Right, and she's working full-time. And, you know, she has personal assistants who come and help her with her tasks of daily living as well. And she's able to work. And in fact, Julia Lamb is able to work part-time, so it's not like she can't work. But it's, you know, she's doing work that is accommodated to her needs and to her abilities. Let's see. I used to travel extensively, primarily for work-related activities and conferences, but I've decided that the stress of travel has become too significant to be worthwhile.
Yeah, at 63 years old.
Right. But the other thing is that she made the choice not to travel. She could still travel.
But it put a little bit too much stress.
Yeah, the cost of traveling doesn't equal the benefit of traveling for her. That's what cost-benefit analysis is.
Yeah.
Several times a year, I present at conferences using Skype. I dictated most of this text, which is often faster than two-finger typing.
Yeah, every day technology improves and gives some tools to people with disabilities.
Right, exactly. One last thing, she says. As we can see from the death of 14-year-old Jerica Bolin in Wisconsin last month, who had spinal muscular atrophy and used a BiPAP for 12 hours nightly, Julia Lamb already has the option of killing herself simply by refusing her BiPAP and entering hospice. As with young Jerica, hospice will gladly increase her narcotics dosage to help suppress breathing, while at the same time sedating her and providing her with no food or fluids until she dies comfortably in her sleep.
Yeah.
Julia's court case is wholly unnecessary. She already has a streamlined path to death.
Yeah, and people who think that dying by thirst or by...
when you're unconscious, you don't feel anything.
That's it.
Right.
So it could look bad, but the people who do that doesn't suffer.
Right. The option to refuse medical treatment and a bypass medical treatment. The option to refuse medical treatment has been there all along, and it wasn't necessary to add euthanasia.
Those laws are not necessary at all for people who really need it.
Right, and that option is still available to Julia Lamb, if she wants to take advantage of it.
Why this?
Right. Why does she want to challenge the law that's been passed that is the best effort to make it work for everybody?
We just don't understand, and we are pissed off about it.
Right. I mean, the law is designed to try to protect vulnerable people who might be induced to commit suicide in a time of weakness. And that includes people with disabilities who might have difficulty in the kinds of things that she's talking about. But the idea isn't to kill those people off. The idea is to help the people to get the skills and support they need to live independently and to live a fulfilling life, not to kill those people off. So, our next subject, assisted suicide ballot initiative approved in Colorado. In Colorado, a ballot initiative allowing physician-assisted suicide passed with 65% of the vote this Tuesday.
So it's disgusting.
Right, exactly. The initiative created a law similar to those in Oregon and Washington. A person must be at least 18 years old and competent to make medical decisions for themselves. They must have a terminal illness defined as having 6 months or less to live, as determined by 2 doctors. The person can receive a prescription for a lethal dose of drugs, which can then be taken in the home.
It's an opening to murder.
Right, exactly. Because there's a very high rate of abuse of disabled people and elders. And if the family can get the prescription, pick it up at the pharmacy, bring it home, who's to say that the person wouldn't struggle if they were given the prescription? There's no one to know that the person is really taking it voluntarily.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they are faced to that, just say no, not now. Okay.
Right.
But the family, if they need the
inheritance,
the inheritance, maybe they will give the poison.
Right. But there's just no way to know if that's what's happening. And
opening to murder.
Right, exactly. And also, assisted suicide has, the difference is in Canada we have euthanasia, and though on the one hand assisted suicide is better because the person has to actually take the action, him or herself, to take the pills. But on the other hand, there are more complications that arise with assisted suicide because sometimes people can't swallow all the pills, or they throw up the pills or whatever. So there are more complications that arise.
There is a lot of complications.
So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But one thing we do know is that the numbers of people who commit assisted suicide are lower than people who have euthanasia. There are more people in Quebec who've had euthanasia than have assisted suicide every year in Washington and Oregon. So, and that's in the first year of Quebec's program.
Yeah.
So, if you want more information about the topics that we discuss here, you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujourvivant, not dead yet, all one word. You can go to our website at tvndy.ca, or you can send us I was just going to say courriel, email at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks so much to Christian for helping out.
Thank you, Amy.
And thanks to you for being there.
See you soon.
See you
and
next time.
Our most profound respect to veterans.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.